Well, folks, thanks for joining in again today. In Canada, the U.S., around the world, we have got some items you're going to be interested in today. Breaking news that you may not find other places, with some of the insights behind the headlights that I try and bring to you. We're going to look at everything from escalations of tensions in China to what you might want to buy your teens for Christmas, according to what teens want. Canada has once again, after last week saying they weren't going to do anything about the religious exemption clause on free speech. They even canceled the committee meeting on it. Guess what? In a surprise move, they've brought it back today and it's going to be voted on. This is a motion that would cancel the protection that right now is accorded to people in free speech if it is based on religious belief. And that is coming from Article 2 of the Canadian Constitution, which is the first freedom that is protected in the Canadian Constitution, freedom of speech based on religious belief. So it's very unsettling to people. Some are wondering about it coming back so quickly. And people are saying, as some of us have been saying for a couple of weeks, if you do care about this, you might want to just hop on the phone or email today, fire off something to your member of parliament and say, hey, what's going on? Why, after centuries of protection, does Canada want to cancel out this religious exemption protection clause? So keep an eye on that. As far as the relationship with the UN and with the US, Canada's former representative to the United Nations, that's a gentleman by the name of Bob Rae. I know Bob personally. I consider him a friend, but we disagree on many things. He used to be Premier of Ontario. When he was that, he brought in socialist NDP policies in the early 90s, which effectively destroyed the economy of Ontario. And then he ran and was elected as a Liberal, showing that the Liberals and the NDP actually have quite a bit in common in terms of how they see policy. And he's come out, now that he's no longer ambassador, really hammering Trump quite publicly, saying, the usual name calling. And it just makes me wonder, and wonder if it makes you wonder, is this type of diplomacy effective against Trump, public name calling and name shaming? There's never been a shred of evidence in the history of Donald Trump, even going back to his business days, where publicly name calling was of any advantage. It usually did not wind up well. And you add that to the fact that Canada's strategy in terms of pushing back against Trump's tariffs, and you've heard me say before, I am not a fan of tariffs. I don't think through history they've been shown economically to work. And but the pushback from Canada has been, again, we've seen the Premier of Ontario take out ads and put them in the public viewing market in the US, really going personal against Trump. We've seen a number of former ministers of the Crown in Canada, Deputy Prime Minister and others, taking out long editorial pieces, again, trying to use the public shaming approach, thinking that will somehow weaken Trump, and then threatening to cancel the contract that we have been working on for years for the F-35 jet fighters, and then going and looking at jets that are made, seriously in Europe by Volvo and other places. Everything we've been doing and saying that we're going to draw closer to China, I have to question the wisdom and the diplomacy there. We're going to see how it works out. So far, it hasn't been a real winner in certain terms of seeing improved trade. In Ontario, the government there is doing something interesting that is going against the holy grail of everything in Canada, which is our public healthcare system. And they are going to be allowing clinics to do knee surgery, hip surgery, that type of replacement surgery. So, of course, the people on the left side of the equation have gone really completely berserk on this. The unions have gone crazy. They're saying this is the destruction of the Canadian healthcare system. And we have to say, hold it, wait a minute. And I looked into this, did the research. What is happening is, first of all, the government in Ontario is putting an increase of $120 million into trying to deal with the lineups for knee and hip surgery. And in doing this, they are allowing clinics which are now private clinics doing some things which are actually permitted under Canadian law in healthcare. And they're saying, okay, you can do these. We're putting extra money into these replacements, but you're not allowed to charge for them. They're completely covered by Canada. Healthcare Act and the Ontario Healthcare Act. And what it's going to do is reduce the lineups at the hospitals, get people out of the long lineups in surgery. Right now, even the unions, the health unions are admitting, yes, it's about 180 days is the average time you wait for a knee or hip replacement. But that's about 62% of people who are waiting for these operations. It's 180 days, 6 months. Many times it's over a year. Sometimes the wait can be 2 years. When I tell business colleagues in the U.S. or friends in the U.S. that people in Canada can wait over a year for a hip replacement or a knee replacement, they literally go into shock. Here in the U.S., you can get one in a matter of days. Anyway, all of that aside, there is the reason there's this clamoring is because anything that looks like private business or a doctor having a clinic is going to meet huge protest from the unions, even though lines will be decreased and the pressures on hospital will be decreased. So let's see if all that protest is going to result in Ontario pulling back on that. We don't know. In the EU, there's something that we've been warning about. In Europe right now, we're seeing the first real restrictions on freedoms on the various platforms that many of us use. The X platform, of course, being huge, X, formerly Twitter, and it is getting hit with the first of fines in terms of, and they're saying what they're doing, they're going after the big platforms, not individuals who are posting, but big platforms like X, and they're saying it's because of violent speech that is being permitted. What is happening when the October 7th attacks of 2 years ago first happened, and with Hamas and the killing and the rape and the murders and kidnapping of Israelis by Hamas, when that first came out, there was, of course, understandably, a reaction against that vicious type of violence on Hamas. But then it began to change, and more you saw on these various platforms criticisms of Israeli or Jewish response from Israel against Hamas violators. And now what's happening is, if there's a couple of cases, this is in Europe, where they're pushing back against X, saying they don't like when you overly talk too much about the Hamas violence, about violence from the Palestinian side seems to get a lot of scrutiny. They don't mind so much if it's violence against Israelis, but if you're too critical and you're bringing up too much detail, some of the violent, horrendous attacks on individuals done by Hamas, you could get punished. You could, and the fines are not small. So they're not fining. What they should be doing is going after individuals who are posting and say, look, we think this is wrong, but they're going after the entire platform, and huge fines of up to $150 million per infraction. So we want to keep an eye on what's going on with that type of restriction. Just jumping back on the U.S. side for a minute, Kristi Noem, who is the head of Homeland Security, she's the Homeland Security Secretary, as they call it in the U.S. Rumors are that she's about to be removed, that it's coming close. Rumors are, and you may have seen some of this, that President Trump likes her personally, but there's all kinds of concerns within the department. This is a very critical role, Homeland Security. When I was Minister of Public Safety in Canada, I spent a lot of time dealing with, negotiating with, and at times collaborating with the Department of Homeland Security. The Secretary of Homeland Security at that time was a guy by the name of Michael Chertoff. We got along very well, worked together on anti-terrorism causes across the border and around the world. So it's a very sensitive position. Some people are upset that she has hired, apparently, or using as an advisor, Corey Lewandowski, who used to be a very close advisor to President Trump back in the day. I've also met with Mr. Lewandowski, had dealings with him, so I have no idea in terms of, they say he has, they're using the quote, an outsized role in the department working with Kristi Noem. I have no idea. what or may be the implications there. But keep an eye on that. It looks like Kristi Noem may be heading out. And the replacement that's being talked about, Glenn Youngkin is right now he's the governor of Virginia, an ally of President Trump. He's done a pretty good job there from all appearances as governor of Virginia. And he's, of course, term limited. They have term limits in the U.S. on governors. So he's going to be available in January. Maybe that's going to be the play. We don't know. What I just was talking about the EU a second ago, and I want to jump back to that for a minute because there's a tendency now in EU on the regulatory side that they're easing off some of the environmental or sustainability restrictions which they had been placing in the eyes of some unrealistically on businesses and governments all around Europe. They're taking a second look. As you know, and mainstream media doesn't like to talk about this, but as more and more scientists are coming to the table pointing out that maybe the world is not ending as we thought it would in a giant ball of heat. And some of these, now we're getting critics on the left in the EU saying this is terrible, that not all of the same restrictions against business are being applied. And the flip side of that is what you may see is, especially in the area of power and heating your home or driving your cars or electrical appliances, whatever it may be, some of the restrictions that were in place are easing off because it's causing for, we dealt with this last week, it's raising the price of everything. And we looked at the fact that just the generation of electricity itself in Europe at 38 cents per kilowatt hour as compared to about 8 cents per kilowatt hour in the US, for instance, gives huge advantage and to businesses doing business in the US, and in fact is drawing a lot of manufacturing out of Europe into US plants. So keep an eye on that. But again, in the reaction to that, watch the left being upset. And here's a little prediction I'll make, a personal area of observation of mine. Watch for when you hear the weather reports. This is where mainstream media, culturally Marxist media, tries to really frighten people in terms of any time it looks like there's not going to be a huge international clampdown on all business because it's killing the environment. So watch for, it's not just going to be a heat wave, watch for reports about, the world about to burst into flame because of heat wave. Watch for the commonly used scare lines like this is, the third biggest heat wave in the history of the universe, or it's never been this cold since Arctic ice was invented. Watch for new terms. The old term for cold, or one term they tried for a while was polar vortex. There's a polar vortex coming. That in Canadian language means there's a cold snap. Watch for these types of terms to increase when you hear the weather forecast. Weather scaring more than weather informing, and that's part of it. Now, some of that's real, and some of these storms, of course, are real, and some of the weather is real, of course. But the use of this language really frightens people and causes them to say, we've got to have even more environmental clampdowns. China and Japan, remember last week I said to watch for this, and we talked about that yesterday in terms of China starting to push back. And China now rattling, not just against Japan, but they're upset that Taiwan is buying more U.S. defense weaponry and highly classified and highly effective defense systems. And China is again, bristling at that and saying, Taiwan, you shouldn't be buying all this military stuff from the U.S. So we're going to see where that's going to go. On the culture side, remember we were talking about the last couple of days, the fact that Netflix is going to be buying Warner Brothers. And of course, people were saying this is terrible. They're going to be so huge now and they're going to control everything. Well, guess what? Paramount has stepped up to the plate. Netflix was offering $82 billion for Warner Brothers. Paramount has come up and they put $101 billion on the table. So it looks like the marketplace, in fact, is alive and well, and there's some competitive bidding going on. And of course, the benefits there. If you've got Warner Brothers shares, you're going to be happy today that there's a bidding war for your shares, basically, is what it comes down to. In the, I always like to keep an eye on the movies that are being touted as the blockbuster new movie, the sensational new movie, and getting all kinds of accolades at these award ceremonies around the world. So the big one right now is called One Battle After Another. One Battle After Another, and is being praised as one of the most fantastic movies ever, involving political intrigue and lots of violence and high-level action. In fact, there are some concerns being raised about it because what it is doing, apparently, and is glorifying the violence that is used by people who are protesting on the streets, people who are dissenters. And of course, there's a big nasty regime that's painted in this movie, and the politicians behind it, and anybody who is seen as even using violence to stop the regime and to stop the big bad man. We know what color he is being painted as, possibly an orange man. So watch for all the propaganda that's going to flow out of that as being encouraging the use of violence on the streets. Aside from that, there's supposed to be some pretty good effects and some pretty chilling scenes in that particular movie. Listen, if you're wondering what you should be buying for your kids or grandkids, or if you are a kid or a grandkid and looking for something for your friends, just a couple of items that are being seen as we do some of the research on what's selling, what's flying off the shelves, not merely in stores, but online. The Hatch alarm. The Hatch alarm. This is a separate alarm that's separate from your iPhone, and people are saying, well, why would especially young people or young adults be wanting an alarm that is separate from your phone? Because that's just another device. And that's the whole reason for it. Apparently, the feeling is if it's a separate device, when it goes off, you pick up your alarm to shut it off. When you pick up your iPhone to shut it off, you automatically are drawn back into all the doom scrolling and everything else that can make you negative about the day. So that particular independent device, the Hatch alarm, keep an eye on that clock. And the Rode brand, that's RHOD, that's of course Hailey Bieber's brand, which has tied into the Sephora brand. One of the big items that they are selling, they're saying watch for this, are eye patches. That's right, eye patches. They're about $25 each, or you can buy them in various combinations. But what they do is apparently they're a good product, and you put them on your eyes and it keeps your eyes from looking puffy. And this is, of course, because especially Gen Z and young adults, they're taking close-ups of themselves so much they're starting to see little wrinkles and puffiness under their eyes if they're staying up too late. So the eye patches, I might think of trying them myself. They're supposed to be pretty effective, but if you want your kids to think you're pretty cool, get them some of those eye patches. The Jellycat, still going to be a big seller. That's that so-called, these adorable plush little animals. And I don't know about you, but I see, adults going through the airports with these little plushy dolls attached to their suitcases or maybe on their knapsacks. I'll let you decide if you think that's a good trend. Adults running around with jelly cats. But add to that, there's a more expensive item that's emerging. It's called the Lola blanket. It's, depending where you are, it's about a $400 value in Canada, and actually the company that makes them is in Canada. This is a super plush blanket. It was originally intended for babies, but more and more teens, young adults are ordering them. You can get them in various sizes, and it makes you feel all warm and comfy and lowers your anxiety level. And so the Lola blanket, if you want your kids or grandkids to think you're pretty cool, but it's going to cost you a little more. They're on the pricey side. On the whole subject of anxiety and reducing anxiety, which is what people are quite rightly looking at as the anxiety levels just stay very, very high, especially among young adults. The late Charlie Kirk, his book is out now. This is just being completed before he was assassinated. And the book is called Stop in the Name of God. And what it is it's his perspective on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day, of course, majorly founded, if you want to use that word, part of Jewish history and Jewish religious belief, and the Sabbath being one of the 10 Commandments to keep it holy. But he's talking about the fact that what he began to do was to shut down entirely for one day a week. His choice, of course, as a Christian was on Sunday. And when he went, he said first it started just like an hour and two on a Sunday, shutting down from the machines. And then he went completely 24 hours, no machines, no turning on the machines, just spending time with his wife and with his kids. And his wife is saying over the last couple of days with the release of the book that it absolutely revolutionized their family relationship, their relationship at home, and has had all kinds of amazing byproducts. So there it is. Look at the Sabbath, stop in the name of God, and your anxiety levels may decrease. Actually, he says in the book, it's not just designed, of course, they use it for religious purposes, but anybody who does this is going to benefit. So there you go, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Hope your anxiety level's going down today and not up, and we'll see you tomorrow.